In Napoleon's era, more soldiers died of hunger and disease than from enemy fire. Armies could march for weeks without reliable food, and that single problem changed history. In the 1700s, there was no refrigeration, no freezing, no vacuum sealing. You preserved food by salting it, smoking it, or drying it, methods unchanged for centuries. Salt-cured meat went rancid on long campaigns. Bread molded within days. Sailors developed scurvy on voyages that lasted months, simply from the absence of fresh food. By 1795, France was at war with most of Europe. Napoleon needed to feed hundreds of thousands of soldiers across vast distances, and the old methods were failing him. So the French government offered 12,000 francs, a staggering sum, to anyone who could devise a reliable new method of preserving food for armies on the march. The man who answered that call was not a scientist or an engineer. He was a Parisian confectioner and chef named Nicolas Appert, with years of experience in sugar, pickling, and fermentation. Starting in the 1790s, Appert began experimenting in his workshop outside Paris. His hunch: if you heated food and sealed it completely away from the air, it might last. He packed food into wide-mouthed glass bottles, corked them tightly, and submerged them in boiling water for hours. Then he did something harder than the experiment itself: he waited. The results stunned him. Months later, the food inside was still edible. Meat, vegetables, broth preserved without salt, without smoke, without anything from the old methods. In 1803, the French Navy tested Appert's jars on an actual voyage. After 4 months at sea, the preserved food was opened and declared wholesome and good. In 1810, Nicolas Appert was awarded the full 12,000 francs. He published a book sharing his entire method with the world and used the money to scale up his bottling operation. But Appert had no idea why his process worked. The germ theory of disease was still 50 years away. He just knew, empirically, stubbornly, that it did. That same year, across the English Channel, a British merchant named Peter Durand read about Appert's discovery and immediately spotted the flaw: glass jars shatter. Glass is heavy. Glass is fragile. Durand's solution was a cylinder made of iron, coated in tin to resist rust. In 1810, he received a patent from King George III for what he called a canister. These early canisters, quickly shortened to cans, were nothing like the thin cylinders in your kitchen today. They were heavy, hand-soldered iron vessels with walls thick enough to require a chisel to open. Durand sold his patent to British entrepreneurs Brian Donkin and John Hall, who opened what is widely considered the world's first commercial canning factory in Bermondsey, London, around 1813. Their first major customer was the Royal Navy. By 1813, Donkin and Hall were supplying preserved meat and soup to British warships heading into open ocean. Canned food went to the far edges of the world. British Arctic expeditions packed cans for voyages into frozen territory where hunting for fresh food was simply impossible. But early cans carried a dark secret. Some were soldered with lead, which could leach into the food. Historians believe this may have contributed to the catastrophic failure of certain polar expeditions. Canning reached the United States by the 1820s. Entrepreneurs in Boston and New York began packing oysters, fruits, and vegetables for a growing urban market hungry for convenience. The American Civil War transformed canning from a niche industry into a national necessity. The Union Army demanded millions of cans to feed soldiers advancing across the South. Factories multiplied across the northern states. By the war's end, production had scaled enormously, and returning soldiers brought home a new habit: eating food that came from a can. But through all of this, Napoleon's armies, Arctic voyages, the Civil War, one glaring problem had gone completely unsolved: How did you actually open the can? Early cans came with instructions that read, in effect, cut around the top near the outer edge with a chisel and hammer. That was the official guidance. For decades. The tin can was invented in 1810. The first practical can opener wasn't patented until 1858, 48 years in which brute force was the intended method of entry. In 1858, American inventor Ezra Warner patented the first true can opener, a curved blade with a guard meant to prevent injury. It worked, but barely, and it was genuinely dangerous. Warner's opener was so awkward that grocery stores kept one behind the counter. You brought your can, the shopkeeper opened it. Customers were not trusted to do it themselves. In 1870, William Lyman invented a can opener with a rotating cutting wheel, far closer to what we use today. Now ordinary people could finally open a can at home, safely. The delay makes a strange kind of sense. Early cans were thick iron, designed as military and naval supplies, opened by specialists. The idea of a consumer cracking one open at home came later. In 1864, Louis Pasteur finally explained what Appert had discovered by accident 50 years earlier. Microorganisms cause food to spoil, and heat destroys them. Canning worked because of science Appert never knew. With Pasteur's insight, canning could be refined. Scientists now understood exactly how long and how hot food needed to be heated to be safe. The guesswork was replaced by precision. Through the late 1800s, heavy iron gave way to thinner steel. Cans became lighter and cheaper, and the market exploded. Canned food shifted from a luxury to an everyday staple. By the early 20th century, canned food was on shelves everywhere. Tomatoes from Italy, sardines from Portugal, pineapple from Hawaii. The world's kitchens were quietly, permanently transformed. Both world wars pushed canning to massive new scales. Millions of cans of meat, vegetables, and soup fed Allied troops across every theater of conflict on every continent. In the early 1960s, engineer Emil Frese invented the pull-tab opening, the ring you yank to open a soda. No tool needed. The can had finally, after 150 years, opened itself. Today, food is loaded into steel or aluminum cans, the air is removed, the can is sealed, and then pressure cooked at temperatures that destroy all harmful bacteria. Appert's basic logic perfected. The result is food that sits on a shelf for 2 to 5 years without refrigeration, without additives. The underlying chemistry has not changed since Appert's glass bottles in a Paris kitchen. By some estimates, hundreds of billions of cans are produced around the world every year. The exact number is difficult to verify, but the scale is genuinely staggering. Most beverage cans today are aluminum, lightweight, recyclable, and far cheaper than the hand-soldered iron vessels that came out of Donkin and Hall's first London factory. Canned food remains one of humanity's most vital tools against hunger. In disaster zones, refugee camps, and food banks, the humble can is often the difference between eating and not eating. Nicolas Appert died in 1841, having given the world a preservation method that has since fed billions of people across more than 2 centuries. He never fully grasped its scale. He was a confectioner, a man who cooked food, sealed it in a jar, and waited. That patient, unglamorous curiosity reshaped the way the entire world eats. The next time you reach for a can of tomatoes or beans, consider what you're actually holding: a direct descendant of Appert's kitchen experiments and a solution to one of history's deadliest logistical problems. A prize offered to feed an army set off a chain of invention that crossed the Channel, crossed the Atlantic, and eventually landed in your kitchen cabinet. One problem, 2 centuries of consequences. Appert's jars became Durand's cans. Durand's cans became a global industry. and none of it would have started without a general's need to keep his soldiers alive long enough to fight. This is Origins. Subscribe and come back tomorrow. There's a new origin every single morning.